The future is here. Peace, and welcome to the Resurrection of Kemetic Astrology. I'm a kind of hawk, father, husband, priest of the Rastafarian tradition of ancient Kemet. And today is a wonderful day. It is a great day. It is reestablishing the cultural basis behind Kemetic astrology, Kemetic astronomy, and Kemetic spirituality. Now, what is our intention with this series? People say, well, isn't astrology good? What's going on here? Astrology has been working for me. Astronomy is universal. Astrology is cultural specific. And though we have great astrological practice today, Vedic astrology, we have it with even Western astrology, what we are lacking is a Black ancestral cultural perspective on how the signs, how the transits, and how the planets play out in a way that would benefit us as Black people. Now, the purpose of this series is to give flowers to the OGs, the progenitors of astrology, just as in other areas of life. As the great Dr. John Henry Clark said, Africans are reading out of a respectable commentary of history, and astrology is no different. So this series will give the flowers and the roses to those who taught those that we learned from today in astrology. What can you expect from the series? You can expect a purification, a resurrection, a rebirth of the practical cultural philosophy behind Kemetic astrology, as there's no Kemetic spirituality without Kemetic astrology. Now remember, the city-states of Kemet, called by the Greeks nomes, called by the Kemites sepats. When you translate the word nomes, you get the word laws, meaning that the nomes of Kemet were laid out according to the laws of heaven, meaning that the true spiritual laws, not 10 laws, 22 laws, 11 laws, the true laws of heaven are governed by the movements of the stars and their placements, because these constellations are these various houses of where the deities reside. We'll see certain temples called Het, Sekemu, or Het, Jehuti. It's not just the physical aspect of the temple here on earth, there's also a resonance and concordance with what is also in the heavens. This also means that when Muster is killed, so-called Osiris is killed, he's killed in a certain sign. When his pieces are brought back together by Offset, it happens in a certain sign. When there's a judgment between Horus or Heru and Set by Ra, that happens in a certain sign. And these stories dictate how we approach astrology, how our story unfolds. The resurrection of Osiris in terms of Offset putting his body back together is related to how we reformulate our identity. What sign is that in? And where is that in your chart? And how does that relate to how you formulate your identity or reformulate your identity? Especially as a Black person in this day and time. Because we know that our identity, as certain expert psychologists, psychiatrists have said, is shattered. So how we reformulate that, there is a sign for that. And these relationships, whether it be in the zodiac itself or outside, as we deal with signs outside of the elite, all dictate a successful life. All dictate what we call today spirituality. How else are you going to change your behavior? Right? Because nomos also translates to what? The laws governing. This was very clear to our ancestors. This was very clear to the Greeks, the Arabs, and other groups of people who learned from them. The foundation of Kemetic spirituality is Kemetic astrology. Right? Now we need to understand what's the difference between astronomy and what's the difference between astrology. Right? Astronomy is where the Greeks got the term nomos, meaning the laws governing the heavens, meaning that when this planet moves into this sign, that happens universally for everyone. Right? But the ology, the logic, the thinking of how that comes across in the culture, how that affects you and me, how that affects our children is very cultural. When I say that my son is in Leo, I'm making a Greco-Roman cultural statement. When I say that Surya in my chart is in Semite, I'm making a Vedic statement. If I were to say that my I-10 is in one of the names of Leo, Wati, that's a different statement. Now, all of them are describing we call in English the sun moving into a constellation, but even looking at sun and Leo in Western astrology and looking at Sun in Simha or Surya and Simha from a Vedic perspective, you can see subtle differences based on the culture. Leo would be what for the Greeks? It's all about you. Egotism. That's what they focus on, being the center of the kingdom. Simha from the Vedic tradition talks somewhat about that, but also talks about other things. Right? But from a Kemetic perspective, Wati would signify mastery, purification, and also signify the cultural aspects of how Africans and Black traditions deal with kingship. So the egotism that you see from the Greeks with Leo, or the Greeks and Romans with Leo, is not going to be to the same degree that you're going to see it in a Black and Southern tradition, or you're going to see it in Kemet, because the accountability and responsibility is different because the culture is different. When I say that my Sun is in Leo, I am aligning myself with a certain flow of energy. And if that works for you, that works for you. If I say that, for example, my I-10 is in YT, or my I-10 is in mine, another name of Leo, I am aligning myself with a certain ancestral dictative energy. To reiterate, astronomy is universal, astrology is cultural. So from the cultural lens of Kemet, you have to look at what a planet and a star is, right? What does that really mean? Well, the consistent or the most used word was Seba. And for those who are familiar with Kemetic spirituality, know that the Ba is labeled to be a part of the spirit. Ba translates to life, it translates to soul, it translates to solar force, translates to personality, right? We're going to focus on the personality part right now. So Ba means personality, but then the word for planet and constellation means Seba. Then what is the relationship? Well, S before a word is usually a causative, meaning that it initiates something. So from my ancestral perspective, a planet, Seba, is initiating a movement or triggering something in our personality. This is not what we call astrology today. When Mars goes into Aries and it triggers more of a push toward justice. And by influencing the personality, it means that it's influencing your thoughts, your behaviors, your action. And it's not spirituality, the training, the understanding of how to get control of your thoughts and actions, your so-called spirit. And not just in this vague statement that many so-called gurus use about the spirit, but more so specifically, your chakras, your organs, your meridians, your nervous system, and how those effects all affect that, because what? As above, so below, which will be shown here in the series. Now, to go further with Seba and Ba, the most basic fundamental understanding of Kemet is Ma'at. But you never hear people talk about Ma'at in an astrological perspective and what that would really mean for order. You have a people, right? Kemet Kush as a confederation coming from the mountains of the moon. In all of Africa, you have a multiplier. You have all of these different statements. The coffin text, the pyramid text, all of these old statements speaking about the heavens and how it was essential and how it truly is Ma'at. Yet you don't hear any of these so-called gurus say that. You don't hear any of these Egyptologists say that. Of course, they have an agenda why they wouldn't say that. But you don't hear any of them say that. But we're going to show that here in this series. We will not let our ancestors' work be violated and disrespected when our ancestors' astrology and astronomy work is what gave the world astrology in the first place. So in the concept of Ma'at, when you read the literature, many times Ma'at, it's not specific. We know, as we showed in our introduction to the fourth Resurrection of Kemetic Astrology, we showed how in the majority of the definitions of Ma'at do not include the scaling. That is the Egyptologist New Kingdom thing that was done as a part of their own agenda in misrepresenting and manipulating our perspective of Ma'at. Most of the definitions of Ma'at have Ma'at. And when you look at Kemetic theology, Kemetic spirituality, the eyes are usually referencing planetary body. Most consistent is the sun and the moon. When you look a little deeper, you see that it also represents stars, constellation. We just stick with the sun and the moon. Doesn't the moon cause the tides to move? Hasn't the moon been shown scientifically to influence growth of plants? There would be no life on this planet without the sun. So how can one talk about not even talking about the sun and the moon? One of the words that describe the sun and the moon together in balance is Ma'at. Yet we have people out here saying that they understand Ma'at and they teach Ma'at and they live by it. And they can't even tell you where the moon is. right? Where Jupiter is and where the sun at least is. So what they're saying, they're telling that they understand mind. So to reinstate, to purify the actual definition of the laws of mind is to say these are the laws governing human behavior and how we respond to life's challenges, which are triggered by the movements and the transits in heaven. And the karma, the mission and role you are born with all play into if you are truly living behind. If at the end of your life, when your heart is weighed, you will be declared Mahakeru. All of those specifics go into what that cultural, that is a cultural respect. That is not a universal perspective. Most of these so-called gurus in the last 60 years, 70 years that are speaking of universal laws are speaking to their ignorance or their manipulation for power of spiritual truths. And as we know, as we go on, when we talk about Pisces later on, in the age of Pisces, it's just everybody's getting manipulated. But Black people in particular have a special place, in the Hall of Fame for being manipulated and being deceived. People speaking of universal laws are revealing their ignorance of spirituality, history, and basic human behavior. And I'll give you an example. Eclipses, right? Eclipses were considered bad for the Roman Empire. Eclipses were considered good for the Ottoman Empire. When they took Constantinople, historically, there was an eclipse. The Romans viewed it as bad, saw that it spelled the end for them. While the Ottoman Empire, it spoke goodness for them. And that's when they went to take the city, or the apple, as they call it. The only thing that is universal is the movements in heaven. The interpretation and logic behind it is culture. Now, back to the laws governing human behavior and knowing that the known was laid out in that manner. This is just one of the things that will erode the foolishness, disrespect of our ancestors by saying that the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians had astrology first. How so? Before Kemet was even unified, you look at Nankapla, and even going back further than that, you see that they were attracting the moon and the stars and the heaven and had calendars. This human behavior is this not what spirituality is about? This is not how modern spirituality markets itself, right? Just transcending your faults, transcending all of these weaknesses, these liabilities that you have in your personality, in your body. Is that not what spirituality is? But to reinterpret that from a Kemetic Kushite astrological perspective, well, how are you going to know when to change that? How are you going to know when you pray or when you meditate at this time, this date, in this season, that goddess, that God will be there? And for us, in the African, the Black ancestral traditions, it really has to do with our Ka. So if your Ka is Oshun on the Yoruba, which can be Hathor or Bas, well, how are you going to know the day, the time, the constellation, the season of when Bas will be there to hear your prayer and answer your prayer so that you can meditate, you can chant, you can say your affirmations, you can dance, you can do your rituals? How are you going to know? The great thing about this and how it connects to Kemetic spirituality is that we know that when you die, your heart, your end, your eye is what is weighed. Well, the spiritual calendar is called the X calendar, ABT, right? Governed by Djibouti. And we also know that Ed is another name for what? The moon. So you can have a spiritual calendar named after your spiritual heart that will be weighed, but it's also the name of the moon. And we know that the moon phases do what? They influence human behavior. We know that police deploy more officers at the full moon because of crime. Right? We know that the word lunacy or lunatic or someone who's so-called crazy is related to the moon, meaning that somebody's thinking, their behavior is related to this transit of the moon and getting control of that and understanding it, not just for you. Another big difference between Black ancestral spirituality, Kemetic spirituality, and other spiritual systems, not just for you as individuals, it's not just about you. This is also about the community, the nation, how you engage with other people. Getting control of that, your ebb, your will. Using your will to, as our ancestors said, to gain control of your hati, your animal instinct, goes into what we call spirituality. So we have the ebb calendar, spiritual calendar, line with the moon phase. We have the 36 Batu, called by the Greeks, the Decans, that solar calendar, the work calendar. Meaning your 9 to 5 was regulated, was in harmony with the solar force. Or you feeling down, you can't come to work today? Well, during this week, rain tech is the interior that we go to a ritual, we need you over here in Felix. a whole civilization, a whole order of life governed by the movement of astral body. This series will not be a superficial blackening of Eurocentric and Indo-European philosophies. We will not be coloring astrology black on the outside. We will go inside to its core and its connections with other black ancestral religions, whether that be on the continent of Africa or as we go into China or in South America with the Mayans and the Amish. We approach, purify, and speak about it the way that our ancestors intended. As I said earlier, when I say my attendant, when I say my sun is in Leo, when I say that Surya is in Sima, these are three different cultural, meaning astrological statements that though they will share lots of similarities, the differences that they share are imperative to understanding you, your ancestors, and what your life path is. Not his story, but our story. What else will be different about this series? It will not be what you see out here in these YouTube streets. So when you do research on Kemetic astrology and Kemetic astronomy, you'll find that there are a lot of so-called gurus out here posturing as if they truly understand it. They are selling calendars, making calendars, calling it Kemetic astrology, when it really boils down to Indo-European philosophy colored black, Gregorian calendars, and planetary hours, and serving it on a platter and saying, this is what your ancestors did. Misrepresenting our ancestors, just respecting our ancestors, quite frankly. Because anyone who does any true study into Kemetic astrology knows that you should at least start with the zodiac gender. I mean, that's Kemetic Astrology 101 or elementary school, being honest. You should at least start with that. They do webinars and don't even mention this, right? They don't even talk about the 36 2, or as the Greeks call the 36 decades or 37 decades if you want to go there. And yet they are saying and professing after 40 years, 30 years, 50 years, these grand experts in Kemetic spirituality. Well, since we have already established and we know the foundation of Kemetic spirituality is astrology, then if somebody's astrology and their calendar's messed up, it should make you start to question their spirituality or what they're calling Kemetic spirituality. And as you look closer, you will see there will just be something else that is colored black, while the inside is still willing white, still the same Greco-Roman values, dressed up in blackface and saying this is what your ancestors were in. So part of our intentions with this series, as well as our series on the resurrection of 14 called Rock, is to end this madness, this last 20, 40, 50 years of madness, disrespect to black ancestral traditions. We will not color anything black. Now, this blackening of Eurocentric philosophies and Eurocentric ideas was necessary in the 60s and 70s as black people were reestablishing their identity, as we will be doing here in the 2020s, 2030s. It was necessary to do that so that we could feel better about ourselves, but it was never supposed to stay that way. We were eventually supposed to go inside, contact the ancestors, unite with other people in Africa to truly understand the cultural philosophy, the deep parts, the innermost part of it, and not just the superficial color of it. And that's what we are here and others will be doing over the next decade, getting to that core, that inside of what our ancestors stood for and what they are, and not just continuing on the tradition of the last 50, 60 years to coloring Eurocentric philosophies black and then serving it to our people and saying this is what makes you superior and this is what your ancestors did. Not true. See you on the next one.